Picture this: a lone wooden ship, its sails straining against the wind, cutting through the endless blue expanse of the Indian Ocean. The crew, guided only by the stars and the whispers of ancient knowledge, navigates waters that stretch farther than the eye can see. But here's the staggering question: who were the very first to map this vast, unpredictable sea? The answer isn't as simple as opening a history book. Hidden beneath the waves and buried in forgotten texts lies a mystery that challenges everything we think we know about early exploration. Could it be that civilizations lost to time, ones we've barely begun to uncover, had charted these routes centuries, even millennia, before the first recorded voyages? This isn't just about maps and sailors. It's about a puzzle that connects the Phoenicians, legendary traders who vanished into myth, the Greeks with their intricate celestial calculations, and even whispers of societies so advanced their very existence is still debated. What if the Indian Ocean's secrets were unlocked far earlier than we ever imagined? The stakes are high because whoever mapped these waters first didn't just draw lines on parchment. They shaped the course of global trade, cultural exchange, and the very flow of history itself. Yet their names, their methods, even their ships have slipped through the cracks of time. That's where our journey begins. Over the next few minutes, we'll piece together fragments of forgotten maps, examine disputed artifacts that defy explanation, and follow the trail of clues left behind by those who dared to sail into the unknown. We'll weigh the claims of rival civilizations, sift through the evidence, and ask, could the truth be stranger than anything written in our textbooks? This is more than a historical deep dive. It's an adventure, one that takes us across oceans and centuries, chasing the echoes of explorers whose stories were nearly erased. So, ready your curiosity, because what we're about to uncover might just rewrite the way you see the ancient world. Could prehistoric sailors have charted the Indian Ocean long before history books claim? Imagine a time when wooden vessels, guided by generations of celestial knowledge, ventured far beyond the shoreline, not randomly, but with purpose. There are whispers in ancient folklore, fragments of pottery washed ashore in impossible locations, and carvings that suggest our ancestors knew more about the oceans than we've ever credited them for. Take the work of historian Charles Hapgood, who studied medieval maps like the Piri Reis manuscript, a chart that bizarrely includes details of Antarctica's ice-free coastline, a feat supposedly impossible for its time. Hapgood argued these maps were copies of far older sources, hinting at a lost era of exploration. Yet mainstream archaeologists remain skeptical. Without physical proof, like a shipwreck or a clearly dated map, these theories live in the shadows of academia. But isn't it curious how cultures separated by vast oceans share eerily similar myths of great floods and seafaring heroes? The Polynesians, for instance, crossed the Pacific using stars and wave patterns alone, proving oral traditions could preserve intricate navigation methods for centuries. Could other societies have done the same in the Indian Ocean? Then there's the hard evidence or lack of it. Wood rots, ink fades, and empires fall, taking their secrets to the grave. But occasionally, the past offers a clue, like the discovery of ancient Roman coins in southern India or Chinese pottery shards in East Africa, suggesting trade routes far older than documented. These fragments tease the possibility of systematic travel, of routes memorized, then mapped. So where do we draw the line between myth and history? The first documented claims of Indian Ocean mapping point to the Greeks and Arabs, but what if they were simply the last in a long line of explorers? The ocean's currents don't forget. they may still hold the answers waiting for us to listen. The Phoenicians weren't just sailors, they were pioneers of the sea, their reputation etched into history as the ancient world's most daring navigators. Imagine a civilization so skilled in shipbuilding and star navigation that they could cross the Mediterranean's treacherous waters and venture beyond, into the uncharted expanse of the Indian Ocean. Their ships, laden with vibrant purple dye, precious metals, and exotic spices, became floating legends. But what truly sets them apart is the tantalizing possibility that they might have been the first to map these distant waters. Take the Periplus of the Erythraean Sea, a first-century document that reads like a sailor's handbook, detailing ports, trade goods, and coastal landmarks from Egypt to India. Some scholars argue this text hints at even older Phoenician knowledge charts passed down through generations, refined by countless voyages. These weren't just rough sketches, they were lifelines for merchants braving monsoons and pirate-infested straits. A single error could mean disaster, so accuracy mattered. Yet here's the twist: no original Phoenician maps survive. What we have are second-hand accounts, leaving room for doubt. Critics point out that Phoenician navigation relied heavily on landmarks and celestial markers, more like mental maps than the precise cartography we think of today. Their routes hugged coastlines, avoiding the open ocean where possible. Does that disqualify them as true mappers of the Indian Ocean? Or does their intimate knowledge of currents, winds, and hidden harbors count as a different kind of mastery? After all, they founded colonies as far west as Spain and possibly sailed around Africa centuries before the Greeks. Then there's the silence of archaeology. Despite their seafaring dominance, few Phoenician shipwrecks have been found in the Indian Ocean. Does absence of evidence mean evidence of absence? Or have their wooden ships simply dissolved into the sea, taking their secrets with them? The debate rages on, but just as we weigh these questions, another civilization emerges from history's shadows, armed with star charts and geometric precision: the Greeks. While the Phoenicians relied on experience and oral tradition, the Greeks took map-making to an unprecedented level of scientific precision. Enter Claudius Ptolemy, a 2nd-century scholar whose work, Geographia, became the foundation of Western cartography for over 1,000 years. His world map, painstakingly compiled from countless traveler accounts and astronomical observations, stretched from the Atlantic to the Indian Ocean, complete with latitude and longitude lines that predated modern coordinate systems by centuries. But here's what's truly fascinating. Ptolemy didn't just invent these details. He built on layers of knowledge, possibly inherited from Egyptian libraries or Persian royal archives, which themselves may have preserved far older seafaring records. Take his depiction of the Indian Ocean not as an endless void, but as a navigable space with identifiable ports like Muziris in modern-day Kerala. His coordinates for Sri Lanka were off by a few degrees, yet shockingly close given the tools of his era. But was this accuracy pure Greek innovation? Some scholars point to anomalies like his mention of a great gulf east of India that suspiciously resembles the Bay of Bengal. Could these details hint at borrowed knowledge from Tamil or Arab sailors who'd already charted these waters? The limitations, though, are telling. Ptolemy's India tapers to a point, missing the subcontinent's true shape, and his Taprobane, likely Sri Lanka, is comically oversized. These errors reveal a critical truth. Even the greatest ancient geographers worked with patchwork information. Ships' logs, merchant tales, and maybe even captured foreign maps were stitched together into a coherent whole, with gaps filled by educated guesswork. Yet the most tantalizing question lingers beneath the surface. When Ptolemy wrote of land to the south beyond the Indian Ocean, was he echoing whispers of Antarctica or just repeating myths? His work became dogma for medieval Europe, but how much of it was original and how much was salvaged from civilizations lost to time? As we turn the page to Arabia's golden age of navigation, remember, every map is a palimpsest, and the Indian Ocean's true cartographers may still be waiting in the shadows of history. Long before Ptolemy's star charts or Phoenician trade logs, the Indian Ocean was already alive in the sacred texts of ancient India. The Rig Veda, one of humanity's oldest surviving scriptures, speaks of Samudra, the ocean, not just as a boundary but as a highway. Verses praise merchants who ride the waves like chariots, hinting at voyages stretching far beyond the subcontinent's shores. But it's the Jataka tales, Buddhist stories of the Buddha's past lives, that paint the clearest picture. These narratives, passed down for centuries before being written, describe ships laden with ivory, spices, and gems crisscrossing the ocean between India and distant lands like Java and Sumatra. One tale even details a storm-driven voyage to Suvarnabhumi, the land of gold, a mythical kingdom scholars now link to modern-day Myanmar or Thailand. What's striking isn't just the storytelling, it's the precision. The texts mention monsoon winds, coastal landmarks, and even navigational tricks like tracking seabird flocks to find land. Could these have been more than metaphors? Some historians argue they're remnants of an oral mapping tradition, where sailors memorized routes through song and story. Imagine a captain chanting verses to recall hidden reefs or safe harbors, turning sacred hymns into living charts. Yet here's the puzzle. If these cultures knew the ocean so intimately, why no physical maps? The answer might lie in India's philosophical worldview. Unlike the Greeks who sought to measure and conquer space, ancient Indian thinkers saw the cosmos as fluid and interconnected. Mapping wasn't about control, it was about harmony. Ports like Lothal, a Harappan site with the world's oldest dockyard, show advanced maritime engineering as early as 2500 BC. But their maps may have been ritual diagrams like the cosmographic mandalas that charted spiritual and physical worlds as one. Then there's Suvarnabhumi, a legend so persistent it drew Chinese pilgrims like Faxian and Xuanzang centuries later. Was it a real place or a mirage of gold and spice that lured sailors deeper into the unknown? The lines blur. Just as we grapple with these questions, another voice enters the debate. From across the Himalayas, Chinese annals whisper of their own mastery of the Western Sea, with records of envoys reaching India as early as the Han Dynasty. The race to map the Indian Ocean suddenly stretches far wider than we thought. While the Greeks and Indians debated celestial navigation across the sea, the Chinese were crafting nautical marvels that would dwarf all previous expeditions. Picture the year 1405, when Admiral Zheng launched the first of 7 legendary treasure voyages under the Ming Dynasty. His fleet wasn't just large, it was staggering. Imagine over 300 ships, some stretching 400 feet long, with crews totaling tens of thousands. These weren't just boats, they were floating cities carrying silk, porcelain, and navigational knowledge so advanced it would take Europe centuries to catch up. At the heart of these voyages lay the Maokun map, a scroll so detailed it plotted every cove and current from China to Africa. But here's the mystery: was this map truly Ming innovation, or did it inherit secrets from even older voyages? Han Dynasty records speak of envoys reaching Huangji, possibly India or Sri Lanka, as early as 200 BC. Tang Dynasty texts describe Persian and Arab traders docking in Guangzhou, exchanging not just goods but star charts. Could Zheng's cartographers have been refining maps passed down for over 1,000 years? The Mao-Kun map itself fuels debate. Its precision in depicting the Maldive and East African coastlines suggests first-hand knowledge, yet some scholars spot inconsistencies like the absence of Madagascar. Was this an oversight or proof the map was cobbled together from older, fragmented sources? The Arabs, meanwhile, had their own mastery. Sailors like Ibn Majid wrote detailed guides to the Indian Ocean's monsoons, and their portolan charts crisscrossed with room lines were traded from Zanzibar to Canton. But what if these two worlds weren't rivals but collaborators? A single Ming ceramic shard found in Kenya's Great Mosque hints at connections deeper than we've dared to imagine. The truth might not lie in choosing between Chinese or Arab pioneers, but in tracing the invisible threads between them, threads woven by monsoons, merchants, and the shared hunger to conquer the sea. While the Chinese treasure fleets and Greek star charts dazzled the imagination, the Arab and Persian cartographers of the medieval Islamic world were quietly revolutionizing how humanity saw the Indian Ocean. At the heart of this golden age stood Muhammad al-Idrisi, a 12th century scholar whose masterpiece, the Tabula Rogeriana, wasn't just a map, it was a revelation. Commissioned by Sicily's Norman king Roger II, this silver-plated atlas depicted the world with a level of detail that left European geographers in awe. But here's what's truly astonishing, his rendering of the Indian Ocean. From the Horn of Africa to the spice ports of Malabar, al-Idrisi's coastlines curve with uncanny accuracy, his cities placed where archaeologists would later dig them up. How did he achieve this precision centuries before satellite imagery? The answer lies in a network of knowledge stretching from Baghdad's House of Wisdom to the decks of Arab dhows. Arab traders weren't just merchants, they were human databases. For generations, their ships had traced the monsoon winds between Zanzibar and Canton, collecting not just silks and pearls, but something far more valuable, geographic intelligence. Pilots like Ahmad ibn Majid, the Lion of the Sea, wrote navigational manuals so precise they could guide a captain from Aden to Calicut using nothing but star elevations and wave patterns. These weren't vague sailors' yarns, they were technical documents with instructions like steer when the pole star rises 2 finger widths above the horizon. Such detail suggests something extraordinary, that Arab maps may have been the culmination of centuries of accumulated wisdom, passed down through Jewish, Persian, and even Tamil intermediaries. Yet a shadow of mystery lingers when al-Idrisi labels Sri Lanka as Serendib or marks the Andaman Islands as land of the cannibals. Is he recording first-hand observations or echoing ancient Greek myths? His map shows the Nile flowing from a mythical southern lake, a Ptolemaic era, yet correctly places Madagascar's latitude. This duality raises a provocative question. Were these Islamic cartographers original innovators or brilliant synthesizers of forgotten knowledge? Consider the Kitab al-Bahr, a 9th century text describing the Indian Ocean's currents with near-modern accuracy. Its author claimed to draw from ancient mariners' logs, hinting at layers of pre-Islamic exploration now lost to time. The proof might lie in the artifacts. Excavations from Suraf, a medieval Persian port, reveal astrolabes calibrated for Indian Ocean latitudes and ship timbers bearing repairs from distant yards. These weren't casual travelers, they were methodical explorers, but just as we marvel at their achievements, another clue emerges, one that ties this entire puzzle together. In the margins of al-Idrisi's maps, faint annotations in Kufic script refer to the charts of the Hind, suggesting Indian sources predating Islam itself. Could the Arab Golden Age have been the inheritor, not the originator, of the Indian Ocean's deepest secrets? The answer may lie not in ink and parchment, but in the waves themselves, where the ocean's oldest maps were written not on paper, but in the collective memory of those who sailed them. Among all the maps that challenge our understanding of history, few spark as much intrigue or controversy as the Piri Reis chart of 1513. At first glance, it's just another Ottoman naval map, but look closer and the anomalies leap out. The coastlines of South America curve with eerie precision, while the Indian Ocean's contours hint at knowledge that shouldn't have existed in the 16th century. Most startling, the map's own creator, Admiral Piri Reis, wrote in the margins that he'd compiled it from 20 older sources, including the Charts of the Infidels, a cryptic reference to maps predating Columbus, possibly salvaged from Alexandria's legendary library before its destruction. Could this explain the impossible details? The map shows parts of Antarctica's coastline free of ice, a condition last seen 6,000 years ago. Mainstream scholars dismiss it as lucky guesswork or artistic license, pointing out that medieval cartographers often filled blanks with myth. But fringe researchers counter, what if Piri Reis had access to fragments of ancient knowledge passed down through Arab scholars or Byzantine monks? The map's depiction of the Indian Ocean's western reaches, like the accurate placement of Madagascar, suggests more than speculation. It's as if someone had pieced together voyages from forgotten civilizations, their names erased by time. Yet for all its mystique, the Piri Reis map has a glaring omission. Much of Africa's eastern coast is distorted or missing entirely. This raises a provocative question. If the map truly held secrets of pre-Columbian explorers, why overlook the Swahili city-states, whose sailors had mastered the Indian Ocean's monsoons for centuries? The answer might lie not in parchment but in oral tradition. While the Ottomans prized written records, African navigators like those of Kilwa and Zanzibar relied on memory, passing star patterns and currents through song. Their maps were living, breathing knowledge etched not on paper but in the minds of elders. This divide between the written and the remembered reveals a deeper truth about the Indian Ocean story. The Piri Reis map, for all its tantalizing clues, is just one thread in a vast, tangled web. To unravel who truly mapped these waters first, we must listen not just to the voices preserved in ink, but to those carried on the wind. While European and Arab maps dominate the historical narrative, the Swahili coast whispers a different story, one written in the stars and passed down through generations. Picture the bustling ports of Kilwa, Mombasa, and Zanzibar, where merchants from as far as China and Persia mingled beneath towering coral palaces. Here, navigation wasn't just about charts and compasses. It was an art woven into poetry, song, and the very rhythm of life. Swahili sailors, known as Nahodha, could read the Indian Ocean's moods like a familiar face tracking the seasonal dance of the monsoon winds, the flicker of specific stars like the Southern Cross, even the subtle shifts in wave patterns that signaled hidden reefs. Their knowledge wasn't locked in parchment but etched into oral epics like the Utendi wa Tambuka, where celestial references doubled as navigational cues. But was this wisdom entirely homegrown? The Swahili world thrived at the crossroads of continents, where Arab dhow builders shared techniques with African fishermen, and Indian traders bartered not just spices but star lore. The word Swahili itself comes from the Arabic Sawahil, meaning coasts, a clue to their interconnected identity. Dig into the ruins of Jeddah, a once great Swahili city, and you'll find Chinese porcelain alongside Yemeni glass, proof of a melting pot that surely exchanged more than goods. Could their famed star compass, a mental map dividing the horizon into 32 directional points, have roots in Arab or Persian astronomy? Or did it evolve independently, refined by generations of sailors who knew the ocean as intimately as their own breath? The answer might lie in a practice few outsiders documented: the Falaki ceremonies, where elders gathered under the open sky to teach young navigators. Unlike the Greek or Chinese focus on precision, Swahili methods embraced flexibility, adjusting routes based on bird migrations, cloud formations, even the taste of seawater. This wasn't just science, it was a dialogue with nature, one that European explorers, reliant on rigid instruments, often misunderstood. When Vasco da Gama reached Melindi in 1498, it was a Swahili pilot, Ibn Majid's possible student, who guided him to India. The irony, the very knowledge that powered Europe's age of discovery, had flourished on these shores for centuries, yet the Swahili left no maps, at least none we'd recognize today. Their charts were living, evolving traditions, sung over campfires and whispered from parent to child. This raises a haunting question: how much of their mastery has vanished with the voices of those who carried it? The ocean remembers, though. In Lamu's narrow alleys, old sailors still point to the constellation Kilimia, the plow to mark the start of the trading season, a thread tying modern docks to ancient wisdom. The true map of the Indian Ocean, it seems, was never a single document but a tapestry of shared knowledge woven by countless hands under countless skies. The vast Pacific wasn't the only ocean the Polynesians might have conquered. What if their legendary double-hulled canoes, capable of crossing thousands of miles of open water, also ventured west into the Indian Ocean? It's a theory that ignites fierce debate among historians, but the clues are too tantalizing to ignore. Picture these master navigators, reading the stars like a road map, sensing land by the flight patterns of seabirds, and steering by the subtle pull of ocean currents. Their knowledge was so precise that modern replicas of Polynesian voyaging canoes, like the Hokula, have retraced ancient routes from Hawaii to New Zealand using only traditional methods. But could their horizons have stretched even farther? Linguistic oddities suggest surprising connections. In Madagascar, an island firmly within the Indian Ocean sphere, the Malagasy language shares striking similarities with Polynesian tongues. Words for basic concepts like fish, sky, and water bear uncanny resemblances to those spoken in Borneo and the Pacific Islands. Even more telling, the Malagasy genetic lineage shows a mix of African and Southeast Asian ancestry, with some studies pointing to a migration wave from the Pacific around 2,000 years ago. How did these linguistic and biological threads weave across an ocean that, by conventional timelines, Polynesians shouldn't have entered? Then there's the sweet potato, a crop native to the Americas but found in Polynesia long before European contact. If Polynesians could reach South America, why not the Indian Ocean? Their voyaging tradition speaks of a people unafraid of the unknown, their voyages driven by exploration, not just accident. Oral histories in places like Tahiti and the Marquesas tell of great western lands, though modern maps show nothing but open sea. Could these stories be foggy memories of Indian Ocean shores? Yet the skeptics have a point. No Polynesian artifacts have been dug up on Indian Ocean beaches, no canoe remnants found tucked in African mangrove forests. The absence is glaring, but consider this: Polynesian canoes were built from organic materials that decay swiftly in tropical climates. Unlike stone temples or metal tools, their legacy might have dissolved into the earth, leaving only whispers in language and legend. What if we've been looking in the wrong places? The Polynesians didn't navigate to leave monuments, they sailed to connect. Their maps weren't drawn on parchment but in the stars, passed down through chants that held the secrets of the waves. The real evidence might not lie in physical artifacts, but in the intangible, the shared rhythms of distant songs, the echo of place names that sound too familiar to be coincidence. The Indian Ocean's currents, after all, don't discriminate. They'd carry a Polynesian canoe as willingly as an Arab dhow or a Chinese junk. The question isn't just whether they could have made the journey, it's whether we've been listening closely enough to the stories they left behind. Beneath the turquoise waters of the Gulf of Combat lies a mystery that could rewrite India's maritime history: the submerged ruins of Dwarka. According to ancient Hindu texts like the Mahabharata, this was no ordinary port city. It was the legendary kingdom of Lord Krishna, a place of towering gates and golden spires, said to have vanished beneath the waves when its divine protector departed the earth. For centuries, these accounts were dismissed as myth until marine archaeologists discovered a grid of stone structures, pottery shards, and even ancient anchors resting 40 meters below the surface. The alignment of these ruins eerily matches descriptions from the epic, right down to the 6 sectors mentioned in the sacred verses, but dating Dwarka has sparked fiery debates. Carbon analysis of recovered artifacts points to a staggering timeline, some materials dating back 9,500 years, long before conventional history places advanced Indian civilizations. Skeptics argue these objects could have been displaced by ocean currents or later settlements, while geologists point to seismic shifts that might explain the city's sudden submergence around 1500 BCE. Yet there's a tantalizing detail. The ruins lie along a prehistoric riverbed, aligning with texts that describe Dwarka's location near the vanished Saraswati River. Now, cutting-edge technology is peeling back layers of the debate. Side-scan sonar reveals precise geometric patterns: walls, foundations, even what could be a submerged dockyard capable of hosting hundreds of ships. These aren't random rock formations, they're the fingerprints of urban planning. Underwater robots have retrieved artifacts like a stone seal engraved with a 3-headed animal, mirroring motifs found in Harappan sites hundreds of miles away. Could Dwarka have been a hub in a vast, interconnected trade network, its sailors charting the Indian Ocean long before recorded history? The most provocative clue lies in the ruins' construction. The stones show signs of advanced mortar techniques, with interlocking joints designed to withstand tidal forces, a feature absent in later coastal cities. If this was indeed Krishna's Dwarka, its builders didn't just live by the sea, they mastered it. As sediment cores and 3D mapping tools uncover more secrets, one thing becomes clear: the ocean floor might hold the missing chapters of a civilization that dared to map the world before maps even existed. Imagine standing on the deck of a wooden ship under a sky so clear the stars seem close enough to touch. Without GPS or even a compass, ancient mariners relied on something far more profound: their intimate knowledge of the heavens. The Polynesians looked to the Pleiades, the Greeks tracked Ursa Major, and Arab navigators measured star angles with a simple yet revolutionary tool: the camel. This unassuming wooden rectangle, notched along a string tied to the teeth, worked like a cosmic ruler. By aligning the bottom edge with the horizon and the top with a guiding star, sailors could calculate latitude with startling accuracy. It was elegant in its simplicity, proof that mastery of the ocean didn't require complexity, just keen observation honed over generations. But the camel was only part of the story. In the hands of medieval Islamic scholars, the astrolabe transformed celestial navigation into a precise science. Picture this: a brass disc etched with constellations, rotating rings marking the sun's path, and pointers that could pinpoint a ship's position by measuring the height of Polaris. Unlike the camel, which demanded clear skies and steady hands, the astrolabe could account for seasonal shifts and even predict sunrise times. Yet both tools shared a common thread. They translated the cosmos into something tangible: a language of angles and degrees that turned the vast unknown into a navigable grid. Wind and water told their own tales. Polynesian voyagers memorized the dance of ocean swells, sensing land long before it appeared on the horizon by the way waves reflected off distant shores. Arab pilots charted the Indian Ocean's monsoon rhythms, riding the summer winds east to India and catching winter gusts back to Africa. These weren't just routes, they were seasonal highways etched into the fabric of trade. The Greco-Roman world, meanwhile, left behind the periplous manuscripts guides that blended celestial data with coastal landmarks, warning of whirlpools or marking freshwater springs. What's haunting, though, are the gaps in this puzzle. The Chinese south-pointing chariot, a mechanical compass said to guide armies through fog, hints at technologies lost to time. Could the Phoenicians, who circumnavigated Africa, have possessed star charts too delicate to survive salt and centuries? Or consider the Vedic texts describing flying machines with navigational instruments. Could these myths preserve echoes of real, sophisticated tools? The ocean keeps its secrets well. The most profound map, however, might have been the one never drawn. Oral traditions like the Swahili, Nyimbo za Bahari, or Songs of the Sea, encoded tides, stars, and currents into lyrics passed down through generations. To sing was to remember, and to remember was to survive. In the end, the greatest tool wasn't a device at all, but the human mind's uncanny ability to turn patterns into pathways and the unknown into the familiar. Forget parchment and ink, the most accurate maps of the ancient Indian Ocean might have been written in cinnamon, pearls, and bolts of silk. Picture a merchant in 1st century Alexandria unpacking a shipment of Malabar pepper, his fingers tracing the journey by scent alone. The peppercorn's pungent aroma carried whispers of Kerala's humid groves. The woven jute sack bore stains from monsoon rains over the Arabian Sea. Its stitching echoed the patterns of Gujarati sailmakers. This wasn't just cargo, it was a living logbook, a tactile record of tides and trade winds encoded in everyday objects. The monsoon winds didn't just enable these journeys, they dictated them. Every summer, Arab dhows rode the southwest monsoons from Oman to India like clockwork, their sails billowing with winds so predictable they were called the sailor's calendar. Come winter, the winds reversed, carrying ships back to Africa laden with Indian cottons and Sri Lankan sapphires. These weren't arbitrary paths, they were seasonal highways etched into the ocean's memory. Ports sprouted where the winds paused, Zanzibar for freshwater, Socotra for repairs, creating a chain of waypoints as reliable as any drawn coastline. Spices told particularly vivid stories. A single clove from the Moluccas might change hands a dozen times before reaching Rome. From Austronesian outriggers to Tamil merchants, Persian middlemen to Greek shopkeepers. Each transfer added layers to its route, like a palimpsest of human movement. Archaeologists find traces of this network in the unlikeliest places: peppercorns stuffed up a pharaoh's nose during mummification, Chinese silks buried in Celtic chieftain graves. These artifacts form a scattered cartography, plotting connections no formal map could capture. Then there were the gems. Sri Lanka's ruby mines supplied jewels to Ming emperors and Mughal princes, their paths marked by unique inclusions, tiny mineral fingerprints that reveal their origins. A skilled lapidary could read a stone's journey from its scratches, the deep grooves from camel caravans across Persia, the smoother wear of monsoon-drenched ship holds. Even shipwrecks tell tales. The Belitung wreck, a 9th century Arab dhow found off Indonesia, held Tang dynasty ceramics stamped with workshop marks that trace back to specific kilns, a breadcrumb trail of commerce stretching 5,000 miles. What emerges isn't just a collection of trade goods, but a collective intelligence. Sailors memorized routes through taste. The salinity shift near the Maldives signaled safe passage east. Persian geographers noted that the finest myrrh grew where frankincense routes turned inland. These weren't mere observations, they were data points in an oral atlas refined over generations. The Indian Ocean's true mapmakers might never have held a quill, but their legacy is written in the cinnamon-stained pages of history. What if the oldest maps of the Indian Ocean weren't carved into stone or inked onto scrolls, but woven into the very fabric of myth? Take the Aboriginal Dreamtime stories of Australia's First Nations, where ancestral beings like the rainbow serpent didn't just shape the land, they charted it. These oral traditions, passed down for over 60,000 years, describe coastlines swallowed by rising seas during the last ice age with eerie accuracy. When modern sonar mapped submerged riverbeds off Australia's northwest shelf, their contours matched Dreamtime accounts of the time when the sea came in. Could these stories be more than allegory? Could they be a form of ancestral cartography, preserving geographic truths too vital to forget? Half a world away, the Sumerian epic of Gilgamesh tells of a great flood so precise in its details that scholars now recognize it as a possible memory of the Persian Gulf's inundation 7,000 years ago. The text describes the 7 sages who brought civilization to humanity, figures some researchers link to ancient seafarers who mapped the Gulf's shifting shores. Even the dimensions of Gilgamesh's fictional ark mirror the proportions of actual Mesopotamian cargo ships. These aren't just coincidences, they're clues. When oral traditions from the Andaman Islands to Arabia speak of lands vanishing beneath the waves, they might be encoding something astonishing, a collective memory of prehistoric geography disguised as legend. Consider the Chola dynasty's Tamil epic, the Silappatikaram, which recounts a merchant's voyage across the black waters of the Indian Ocean. The text doesn't just describe storms, it names specific currents and reefs, details so practical they read like a sailor's manual. Similarly, the Javanese myth of Ratu Kidul, the Queen of the Southern Sea, includes warnings about whirlpools near Lombok Strait, hazards still marked on modern nautical charts. The line between myth and map blurs, but here's the real question: why encode geography in stories? The answer might lie in resilience. Parchment fades and stone erodes, but a well-told tale can survive generations. The Vikings used sailing poems to memorize routes, embedding navigational cues in verse. Polynesian chants listed star paths as precisely as coordinates. If the Indian Ocean's first cartographers faced rising seas or collapsing civilizations, wrapping their knowledge in myth wouldn't just preserve it, it would ensure its survival in the mouths of storytellers long after their ships turned to dust. The ocean itself seems to whisper this truth. When linguists compared flood myths from India to Madagascar, they found shared words for wave and horizon, buried in otherwise unrelated languages. Like flotsam from a sunken vessel, these fragments hint at a time when storytelling wasn't just art, it was survival. The next time you hear an ancient tale of deluge or discovery, listen closely. Behind the magic might lie the pulse of tides, the shape of shores, and the whispers of explorers who mapped the world not with pens, but with memory. Buried in a New Zealand museum sits a corroded metal bell, its surface etched with Tamil script, a language spoken thousands of miles away in southern India. Discovered by missionaries in the 1800s, the so-called Tamil bell has baffled historians for generations. How did an artifact so distinctly tied to the Indian subcontinent end up halfway across the world, centuries before European explorers charted the Pacific? This isn't an isolated mystery. Roman coins minted during the reign of Augustus turn up in Tamil Nadu, while pottery shards from ancient Yemen appear along Australia's northern coast. These out-of-place artifacts, or OOP arts, dangle a provocative possibility that the Indian Ocean's early explorers ventured far beyond the routes recorded in history books. The explanation split scholars into fierce camps. Traditionalists argue these objects arrived through established trade networks. A Roman denarius passed hand to hand from Alexandria to Musuris, or an Indian bell lost in a shipwreck, then carried by currents over decades. After all, ocean drift can propel debris astonishing distances. A single monsoon could sweep a vessel from Indonesia to Madagascar, as demonstrated by modern flotsam studies. But drift alone can't explain the Tamil bell's intricate inscriptions, which include a prayer to a ship's guardian deity. This wasn't just cargo, it was a sacred object the kind sailors wouldn't casually discard. Then there's the distribution pattern. Roman coins cluster near India's ancient ports, aligning with Greco-Roman texts that describe bustling trade. But outliers defy easy logic, like a handful of Ptolemaic-era coins found in Vietnam, or the Kushan Empire's Buddha statues unearthed in the Philippines. These aren't scattered fragments, they're concentrated in ways that suggest deliberate exchange. Could undocumented voyages have connected these dots? The theory gains traction when you consider the wary people of Peru, who wove sails from cotton identical to Indian varieties centuries before Columbus. Coincidence or evidence of a thread stretching across oceans, yet skeptics counter with brutal simplicity: absence of ships. No sunken Tamil vessels have been found near New Zealand, no Roman hulls off Java. Without physical proof of transoceanic craft, the trade argument holds sway. But here's the twist: absence doesn't equal impossibility. The Indian Ocean's warm waters devour wood quickly, leaving few wrecks to study. Meanwhile, oral traditions from Sri Lanka to Sumatra speak of floating cities that vanished without trace. Perhaps the real map of these forgotten voyages isn't in artifacts we've found, but in the gaps between them, the silent spaces where history still waits to surface. The flames that consumed the library of Alexandria didn't just burn parchment, they erased entire worlds of knowledge, including what might have been the most sophisticated maps of the ancient Indian Ocean. Picture the library's vast halls, where scholars from Greece, Egypt, and beyond once pored over scrolls detailing coastlines from the Red Sea to the Ganges. Among them, the works of Marinus of Tyre, a geographer whose texts Ptolemy himself referenced, supposedly contained accounts of voyages reaching Taprobane and beyond. But what if the library held even older treasures? Fragments suggest it housed Persian royal charts, copies of Phoenician trade logs, and perhaps even Indian yantra diagrams, wooden navigation aids mentioned in Sanskrit texts but lost to time. The real tragedy lies in the gaps. When the library burned, it took with it the work of explorers like Eudoxus of Cyzicus, who allegedly sailed to India using monsoons a century before Hippalus discovered them. His lost journals might have revealed how Greek knowledge intertwined with Arab and Tamil sailing traditions. Even more tantalizing are the whispers of a world map room, where, according to the scholar Strabo, maps were updated in real time using merchant reports. One can almost see them: great sheets of papyrus marked with coral reefs near Socotra, monsoon schedules for the Malabar coast, and perhaps even the first attempt at a latitude-longitude grid. Speculation runs wild among historians. Did the library's holdings include Chinese silk maps traded along the spice route, or Arab dafters, logbooks from sailors who'd rounded Africa? The most provocative theory comes from fringe researchers who point to Claudius Ptolemy's oddly accurate coordinates for Sri Lanka. His sources, he claimed, were ancient. Could he have been copying Alexandria's salvaged records, now lost? the truth may lie in a single surviving clue. A 9th century Arab scholars mention of finding Greek sea charts in a Cairo warehouse, their edges charred but still legible. They reportedly showed the Indian Ocean's southern reaches with an accuracy unmatched until the Renaissance. Then, like so much else, they vanished. The fire's greatest casualty wasn't just knowledge, it was connection. Those maps might have revealed how Egyptian pharaohs traded with Punt, possibly Somalia, or how Tamil kings sent envoys to Augustus. Instead, we're left with echoes, a line in a poem, a coin in the wrong place, a ghostly outline on a medieval copy of a copy. The Library of Alexandria didn't just burn books, it burned bridges between civilizations, leaving us to wonder how much sooner the world might have been charted if only those shelves had survived. While Arab cartographers like Al-Idrisi plotted the Indian Ocean with startling precision, medieval European maps told a very different story, one tangled in myth and theological dogma. Picture the Hereford Mappa Mundi, a colossal 13th century parchment that framed the world as a divine allegory. Jerusalem sat at its center, while the Indian Ocean curled around the edges like a decorative border, crammed with sea monsters and the mythical kingdom of Prester John. Distances warped unnaturally. Sri Lanka ballooned to twice the size of Britain, and the Arabian Peninsula shrank to a stub. These weren't navigational tools, they were sermons in ink, designed to reinforce Christian cosmology rather than guide sailors. The contrast couldn't be starker. Just decades before the Hereford map's creation, Arab navigators in Zanzibar were using latitude measurements accurate to within a degree, while Venetian merchants relied on Portoland's practical coastal charts that ignored the ocean's southern reaches entirely. Europe's blind spot had roots in isolation. After Rome's fall, contact with Indian Ocean trade networks frayed, leaving geographers to recycle Greco-Roman errors. Ptolemy's miscalculation of the Indian Ocean as a landlocked sea persisted for centuries, compounded by legends like St. Brendan's fantastical voyage across a paradise-filled ocean. Yet the turning point came with violence, not scholarship. When Vasco da Gama rounded the Cape of Good Hope in 1498, his fleet carried outdated maps showing India just beyond Africa's eastern coast. The shock of reality hit hard. Arab pilots in Melinde had to correct the Portuguese, revealing an ocean far vaster than Europe imagined. Da Gama's subsequent brutality, burning Muslim ships, slaughtering fishermen, betrayed a deeper panic. Europe was centuries behind. The age of exploration became a crash course in humility. Portuguese cartographers like Pedro Rianel scrambled to synthesize Arab knowledge with European methods, producing the Cantino planisphere of 1502. For the first time, Europe saw the Indian Ocean's true shape, Madagascar in its proper place, the Maldives as a precise archipelago, the Swahili coast drawn from first-hand accounts. The myths didn't vanish overnight. Sea serpents still slithered into margins, but the ocean's centrality to global trade became undeniable. What's rarely admitted is how much Europe owed to the very cultures it sought to dominate. The Cantino map's accuracy hinged on stolen Arab charts and interviews with Gujarati merchants. Even the compass, Europe's navigational pride, had roots in Chinese and Islamic prototypes. The real discovery wasn't new lands, but the dawning realization that the world's best maps had existed all along, just not in European hands. When Vasco da Gama's fleet finally anchored off Calicut in 1498, the Portuguese celebrated it as a triumph of European ingenuity, but the truth was far more complicated. Yes, Portuguese caravels had pushed further than any Christian ships before them, but their breakthroughs relied heavily on knowledge borrowed, bartered, and sometimes stolen from the very cultures they sought to dominate. Take the Cantino Planisphere, a smuggled map from 1502 that revealed the Indian Ocean with shocking accuracy. Its details, the curve of Africa's eastern coast, the placement of Madagascar, didn't come from Portuguese explorers alone. They were painstakingly copied from Arab and Gujarati charts, acquired through espionage in North African ports, or bribed from Muslim pilots in Melindi. The secrecy surrounding Portugal's cartography bordered on paranoia. The Casa da India in Lisbon became a vault of forbidden knowledge, where master mapmakers like Pedro Rienel worked under oath, their charts classified as state secrets. Any sailor caught smuggling maps faced execution, a draconian measure that speaks volumes about how much Portugal's power rested on borrowed intelligence. Even the famed Padrão Real, the master map updated with each new voyage, was likely compiled from sources as diverse as Jewish astronomers in Morocco and Tamil fishermen's star lore. Yet for all their ruthlessness, the Portuguese made genuine leaps. Their vol-to-dumas technique, sailing wide arcs to harness Atlantic winds, showed an innovative grasp of oceanography. But was this truly original? Some scholars spot eerie similarities to Polynesian hook sailing methods, while their lateen-rigged caravels owed their design to Arab dhows. The line between discovery and appropriation blurs further when you examine their logs. Da Gama's own scribe recorded how a Gujarati merchant in Melindi laughed at their primitive charts before handing over a navigational manual so precise it listed the declination of stars over the Indian Ocean, knowledge Arab sailors had refined over centuries. The greatest irony lies in what the Portuguese ignored. While obsessed with controlling spice routes, they dismissed monsoon calendars as pagan superstition, leading to countless shipwrecks. Their maps, though beautiful, often omitted critical details shared freely by Swahili and Malay pilots: shoals, seasonal currents, even medicinal plants found on remote islands. In their rush to claim the ocean, they missed its deeper wisdom. The real breakthrough wasn't in their ink and parchment, but in the moment they realized true mastery required listening to voices they'd once dismissed. The moment European ink touched parchment, entire civilizations vanished from the map, not physically but cartographically. Indigenous knowledge of the Indian Ocean, honed over millennia, was reduced to blank spaces labeled terra incognita, or overwritten with European names that erased local ones. Consider the Maldives, where generations of fishermen navigated by memorizing coral formations and seasonal currents, creating mental maps so precise they could predict tidal shifts down to the hour. Their knowledge never made it onto Portuguese charts, which dismissed the archipelago as a scattering of nameless dots. Yet in Maldivian oral tradition, each atoll had distinct names reflecting their shape, resources, and dangers, like Fuvomula, meaning island of the areca nut, or Thodu, named for its circular reef. These weren't just labels, they were ecological guideposts encoding survival wisdom colonial maps ignored. Oman tells a similar story. While European maps portrayed the Arabian Peninsula as a vague bulge, Omani sailors had been piloting dhows to Zanzibar and Gujarat using Kot al-Rir, or wind lines, mental maps of monsoon patterns passed down through families. Some of these routes were later documented in the Kitab al-Fawaid, a 14th century navigational manual that listed star altitudes and coastal landmarks with scientific precision. Yet when the British Admiralty commissioned its first Indian Ocean charts, they credited Arab knowledge only as native reports, never as equal to European surveying. The irony is staggering. The same winds Arab pilots had mastered for centuries were rebranded as trade winds, a term still used today that obscures their origins. The erasure wasn't accidental, it was ideological. colonial maps served as tools of control, legitimizing territorial claims by portraying empty spaces ripe for conquest. Take the case of the Chagos archipelago, meticulously charted by Maldivians as Foi Mulaku, a name referencing its fish-rich waters before French maps redubbed it Bassas de Chagas. Later British surveys went further, erasing local names entirely to justify displacing indigenous communities for a military base. This pattern repeated across the ocean from Australia's Aboriginal songlines, dismissed as myth to Swahili portolan charts locked away in Lisbon's archives. Yet fragments of indigenous cartography survived. In Kerala, palm leaf manuscripts called Kotupona detail sailing directions to Southeast Asia using Tamil poetic meter, turning navigation into rhythmic verse. The Maldive Revaru system encoded wave patterns in oral poetry, while Ammani shipbuilders kept How diaries with sketches of hull designs optimized for monsoon seas. These weren't primitive approximations, they were sophisticated adaptations to environments Europeans often misunderstood. When Dutch maps labeled parts of Sri Lanka's coast as uninhabitable due to monsoon floods, local maps showed how villages timed planting cycles to those very floods, transforming hazards into lifelines. Decolonizing this history means more than adding footnotes. It requires rethinking what counts as a map. The Marshall Islands stick charts, weaving palm ribs into wave patterns, or the Inuits' carved ivory coastal maps challenge Eurocentric definitions of accuracy. Even the lines themselves tell a story. Where European maps prioritized straight meridians, Javanese charts used squiggles to denote currents, acknowledging nature's unpredictability. The Indian Ocean's true cartographers didn't just draw coastlines, they sang them, carved them, and wove them into stories no flame could erase. Their maps live on not in atlases, but in the fishermen who still navigate by the stars their ancestors named, and the elders who recite the old words for places others tried to rename. Beneath the waves of the Indian Ocean lies a hidden library of lost history, one that's only now beginning to yield its secrets. In 2021, marine archaeologists diving off Egypt's Red Sea coast stumbled upon the sunken port of Berenike Troglodytica, a bustling hub from Ptolemaic times. Among the ruins, they found teakwood from India, black pepper from Kerala, and even coconuts from Sri Lanka, proof of trade routes stretching thousands of miles earlier than previously documented. But what makes Berenike extraordinary isn't just its artifacts. It's the way its layout contradicts ancient texts. The harbor's design, with its wave breakers aligned to monsoon winds, suggests local sailors understood the Indian Ocean's rhythms centuries before Greek geographers wrote about them. Yet these discoveries come at a price. Underwater archaeology in the Indian Ocean faces hurdles unlike anywhere else. The sheer depth of some sites, like the 7,000-year-old submerged settlements near India's Gulf of Combat, requires robotic submersibles capable of withstanding crushing pressures. Sediment layers here shift unpredictably, burying artifacts under meters of sand within months. And then there's the salt. Unlike the Mediterranean's calmer waters, the Indian Ocean's high salinity accelerates the decay of organic materials. A wooden shipwreck that might survive millennia near Greece could disintegrate here in mere centuries, taking its cargo of clues with it. The rewards, though, outweigh the risks. In 2019, a team exploring the Java Sea uncovered a 9th-century Arab dhow carrying a cargo that rewrote textbooks, Chinese ceramics stamped with rain marks from the Tang dynasty, Persian glassware, and most astonishingly, raw gemstones from Madagascar. This single ship proved direct trade links between East Africa and China existed over 1,000 years ago, long before Marco Polo's famous journeys. Even more tantalizing are the unexplained outliers like the Roman-era amphorae found off Sri Lanka's coast, far from any known Roman trade routes. Were these lost cargo or evidence of voyages history forgot to record? Future technologies promise even greater revelations. Multi-beam sonar now maps entire seabeds in days, revealing anomalies invisible to divers. DNA analysis of ancient shipworm holes can trace timber origins to specific forests. And AI algorithms sift through satellite data, flagging potential sites by analyzing wave patterns over suspected ruins. One project, the Indian Ocean Slave Rex program, uses these tools to locate sunken slave ships, their manifests often the only records of countless lives erased by history. The ocean guards its secrets jealously, but not forever. With every storm that shifts the sands, another clue emerges. Perhaps the next dive will uncover a Phoenician wreck off Goa or a Harappan trading post beneath the Gulf of Oman. Until then, each crumbling amphora and waterlogged logbook whispers the same truth. The Indian Ocean's first mapmakers left their charts not on paper, but in the paths their ships once sailed. From space, the Indian Ocean's past whispers in shades of blue and green. Satellite imaging has peeled back layers of time, revealing ghostly outlines of river valleys and coastlines now drowned beneath the waves. These spectral shapes, captured by radar and multispectral scanners, tell a story of a world reshaped by rising seas, a story that might hold clues to civilizations swallowed by the tides. Take NASA's shuttle radar topography mission, which mapped submerged river systems off India's west coast. These ancient channels, invisible from the surface, align eerily with Tamil Sangam literature's descriptions of a lost Kumari Kandam, a legendary continent said to have connected India to Madagascar before the oceans claimed it. The idea isn't pure myth. Geologists confirm that sea levels rose nearly 120 meters since the last ice age, drowning vast stretches of continental shelf. But separating fact from folklore requires caution. When satellite images showed a U-shaped structure near India's Konkan coast, some hailed it as the ruins of a sunken city. Closer inspection revealed a natural basalt formation, a reminder that pareidolia, our brain's tendency to see patterns, can trick even seasoned researchers. The real value of these technologies lies in their subtle revelations. For instance, chlorophyll signatures detected by the European Space Agency's Sentinel satellites have pinpointed submerged mangrove forests off Oman ecosystems that flourished when shorelines were kilometers farther out. These aren't just academic curiosities, they're waypoints for underwater archaeologists, guiding dives to areas where humans once thrived. The legend of Kumari Kandam exemplifies both the promise and pitfalls of this search. Tamil texts describe a sophisticated land with bustling ports, later fragmented by the sea. While no continental remnant exists, bathymetric data does show a drowned landmass called the Kerguelen Plateau, submerged millions of years ago, far too early for human habitation. Yet the persistence of the Kumari narrative across cultures hints at a kernel of truth. Similar flood myths from Mesopotamia to Malaysia often reference specific geographic features, like the Sunderland Shelf, once a vast prairie connecting Southeast Asia's islands. Satellite salinity measurements have even traced freshwater plumes from submerged rivers, suggesting these stories might encode ancestral memories of lost homelands. Technology's greatest gift may be humility, as LiDAR scans expose intricate networks of prehistoric fish traps off Australia's northwest shelf, or side-scan sonar uncovers megalithic structures near Japan's Yonaguni. We're forced to confront how little we know. The Indian Ocean's floor is a palimpsest, its oldest human stories likely erased by currents and time. But with each pixelated glimpse from orbit, we're learning to read between the lines, not as treasure hunters chasing Atlantis, but as detectives piecing together a planet's ever-changing story. The truth, as always, lies somewhere between the waves and the stars. The race to claim the Indian Ocean's cartographic crown isn't just about history, it's about national identity in the modern world. Walk through New Delhi's National Museum, and you'll find ancient Sanskrit texts like the Uktakalpataru displayed as proof of India's maritime supremacy, their pages detailing shipbuilding techniques and star navigation methods from over 2,000 years ago. Meanwhile, Beijing's Grand Canal Museum spotlights Zheng's treasure voyages with equal pride, presenting the Mao Kun map as evidence that China's mastery of the seas predated Europe's by centuries. In Muscat, Omani scholars point to Ibn Majid's 15th century navigational manuals as the true Rosetta Stone of Indian Ocean cartography. Each nation's narrative is meticulously curated, turning brittle manuscripts and sunken artifacts into symbols of cultural resilience. Beneath these displays lies a high-stakes game of soft power. When India's government funds excavations at Lothal, a Harappan port dating back 4,000 years, it's not just archaeology, it's a statement about continuity in a region where colonial histories once overshadowed indigenous achievements. China's Belt and Road Initiative deliberately echoes Zheng's Voyages, framing modern infrastructure projects as the revival of an ancient maritime legacy. Even the Arab world's emphasis on the golden age of Islamic cartography serves a purpose, reclaiming a narrative often sidelined by Western-centric histories of exploration. These claims aren't merely academic, they shape everything from museum budgets to territorial disputes in the South China Sea. Yet the competition obscures a deeper truth: the Indian Ocean was never mapped by any single civilization. Tamil Sangam poetry describes Greek traders in Madurai, while Chinese annals record gifts from Roman embassies. A single 9th century shipwreck near Belitung carried Abbasid glassware, Tang dynasty ceramics, and Sumatran gold, a floating testament to interconnectedness. The ocean's currents don't recognize borders. They carried Omani D-house to Guangzhou and Maldivian cowrie shells to West Africa centuries before globalization became a buzzword. The way forward might lie in shared scholarship. Projects like the UNESCO Silk Roads Initiative have shown how collaborative archaeology can untangle intertwined legacies without diminishing any culture's contributions. Imagine Indian and Chinese researchers jointly studying the Chola dynasty's naval records alongside Ming dynasty logs, or Omani and Kenyan teams preserving Swahili oral navigation songs before they vanish. This isn't about surrendering national pride, it's about acknowledging that the Indian Ocean's greatest mapmakers were often those who listened as much as they explored. After all, the stars that guided Vasco da Gama to India were the same ones Arab sailors had used for generations. The past, like the ocean, belongs to everyone who dared to sail it. History loves to crown its heroes great men with maps and compasses, their names etched in textbooks. But what about the women who stood beside them, or even ahead of them, shaping our understanding of the world? Take Fatima al-Fihri, the 9th century scholar who founded the University of Al-Qarawiyyin in Fez, a hub of learning where geography and astronomy flourished. While she's celebrated for creating the world's oldest degree-granting university, few mention the possibility that her institution's libraries housed star charts and navigational treatises, knowledge that might have filtered into the Arab world's golden age of cartography. Was she just a benefactor, or did her influence extend to the very maps that guided ships across the Indian Ocean? The silence in the record speaks volumes. Then there's the mystery of Queen Hatshepsut's expedition to Punt. Carved into the walls of her mortuary temple at Deir el-Bahri are scenes of Egyptian ships returning from this fabled land, likely modern-day Somalia, laden with incense, ivory, and exotic animals. The reliefs show detailed renderings of Punt's houses on stilts and its rulers' distinct physique, suggesting first-hand observation. Hatshepsut didn't just sponsor this voyage, she may have dictated its documentation, turning a trade mission into one of history's earliest geographic records. Yet modern accounts often reduce her role to that of a passive patron, ignoring the likelihood that she shaped how these discoveries were mapped and remembered. Skipping ahead to medieval Europe, we find another shadowy figure, the nun Egeria. Her 4th century pilgrimage account, Itinerarium, meticulously describes routes from Constantinople to Jerusalem, noting landmarks, distances, and even local customs. While not a map in the traditional sense, her writings functioned as a textual guide, a precursor to the portolan charts sailors would later use. Imagine the countless women like her, their travel diaries circulating in convents, quietly influencing how people visualized the world. The Indian Ocean's own traditions hint at even deeper erasures. In the Swahili coastal towns, oral histories speak of Wanawake Baharia, women of the sea, who memorized monsoon patterns and star sequences. These weren't just fishermen's wives, they were navigators in their own right, their knowledge passed down through songs and stories. Yet when Arab and European chroniclers wrote their histories, these women became footnotes if they appeared at all. Even in China, where Zheng Voyages dominate the narrative, whispers persist of female stargazers in the Ming court who calibrated navigational instruments. A single porcelain shard from the wreck of a treasure ship bears a tiny, faded inscription, a woman's name beside a latitude calculation. Was she a mathematician, a sailor's beloved, or something in between? The artifact refuses to tell. The pattern is clear. Women didn't just inhabit the margins of cartographic history, they helped write it, only to have their contributions blurred or erased. Reclaiming their legacy isn't about rewriting the past, it's about seeing it fully. After all, the stars they charted and the coasts they documented haven't vanished. They've been there all along, waiting for us to look beyond the edges of the map. While the Silk Road conjures images of camel caravans snaking through deserts, its maritime twin, the Indian Ocean's vast web of trade, moved goods, ideas, and people on a scale that dwarfed its overland counterpart. Picture the monsoon winds as invisible highways, their predictable rhythms turning the ocean into a pulsating network where Egyptian glass met Sumatran spices and Persian silver traded hands for Chinese silk. This wasn't just commerce, it was the world's first experiment in globalization, fueled by maps etched not just on parchment, but in the collective memory of sailors who memorized star paths and currents like the lines on their own palms. The real genius of this system lay in its decentralization. Unlike the Silk Road, where empires controlled choke points like the Pamir Mountains, no single power could dominate the ocean's fluid expanse. A Tamil captain might navigate to Zanzibar using constellations named in Sangam poetry, while an Arab pilot relied on room lines drawn by Basra's astronomers. Chinese junks riding the northeast monsoon could dock in Malacca alongside Javanese outriggers laden with sandal, wood. What stitched these disparate threads together wasn't imperial decree, but shared knowledge. Portolan charts traded like currency, or bamboo sticks notched with tide tables passed from father to son. The legacy of this exchange still hums beneath our modern world. Walk through Singapore's streets today, and you'll hear echoes of those ancient routes in the Malay spoken by Indian merchants, or the Arabic loanwords woven into Swahili along Africa's coast. Even the humble compass rose on nautical charts, a fusion of Chinese magnetized needles and Arab angular divisions, bears witness to this cross-pollination. The ocean didn't just connect ports, it fused cultures, birthing hybrid languages like Chittagonian, a blend of Portuguese and Bengali, or the Creole cuisine of Zanzibar, where saffron meets coconut milk. Yet the most enduring map of this network might be written in DNA. Genetic studies reveal Malagasy people carry Southeast Asian ancestry, likely from Bornean sailors who braved the ocean's breadth 2,000 years ago. In Oman, descendants of African and Persian unions still craft tea, house using techniques unchanged since Sohar's golden age. These aren't just footnotes, they're living proof that the Indian Ocean's true cartographers weren't kings or conquerors, but the unnamed merchants, sailors, and spouses who wove continents together one voyage at a time. Today, as container ships retrace these ancient paths, their GPS systems unknowingly following medieval wind lanes, the ocean reminds us that connectivity isn't a modern invention. It's a tradition as old as the first fisherman who paddled beyond the horizon, trusting the stars to guide him home. The maps may have faded, but the currents remember. The same ocean currents that guided ancient mariners now pulse through the data streams of modern satellites, linking past and present in ways we're only beginning to grasp. Today's oceanographers, armed with robotic submersibles and AI-driven wave models, might seem worlds apart from Arab pilots steering by the camel or Polynesian navigators chanting star paths. Yet the challenges remain eerily similar, mapping the unknown, predicting the unpredictable, and humbly accepting that the ocean will always hold secrets. The key difference: modern tools let us peer deeper, but they haven't replaced the wisdom etched into traditional knowledge systems. Take the Polynesian Voyaging Society's Hokula, a replica double-hulled canoe that sailed from Hawaii to Tahiti in 1976 using only ancestral wayfinding techniques. Its success wasn't just a cultural revival, it was a scientific revelation, proving that star compasses and wave reading could rival GPS for accuracy in open water. This fusion of old and new is reshaping oceanography. When researchers tracking coral bleaching in the Maldives partnered with local fishermen, they uncovered something startling: the fishermen's oral records of spawning cycles, passed down through generations, pinpointed reef changes decades before scientific monitoring began. Similarly, NAS, a sea-level change team, now consults Pacific Islander elders about historical tide patterns, recognizing their observations as invaluable climate data. It's a powerful reminder: ancient mariners didn't just survive the ocean's whims, they decoded its rhythms with a precision modern instruments sometimes struggle to match. Yet time is running out to preserve this living heritage. With every elder who passes without transmitting star lore, or every coastal dialect displaced by globalization, a fragment of humanity's ocean memory fades. Organizations like UNESCO Intangible Cultural Heritage List are racing to document practices like the Swahili Falaki ceremonies or the Marshall Islands stick charts before they vanish. But preservation isn't enough, we need integration. Imagine satellite altimeters calibrated by Tamil fishermen's monsoon proverbs, or deep-sea drones programmed with Ibn Majid's medieval wind algorithms. The future of exploration might lie in these hybrid approaches, where supercomputers and songlines collaborate to chart the abyss. The ocean's next frontier isn't just geographic, it's conceptual. While sonar maps the seafloor, we're still deciphering the ecological, dark matter of microbial webs that ancient sailors intuitively respected. When Zheng's fleet avoided fishing grounds during spawning seasons, they were practicing sustainability centuries before the term existed. Today, as we grapple with overfished waters and melting ice caps, their reverence for balance feels less like nostalgia and more like a blueprint. The Indian Ocean's first cartographers understood something we're relearning. To navigate is not to conquer, but to converse with the waves, the stars, and the generations who sailed before. Their maps weren't just tools, they were treaties with the unknown. As our submarines plunge deeper and probes venture farther, that's the lesson worth carrying forward. Not just how to chart the water, but how to listen to it. The truth of who first mapped the Indian Ocean doesn't lie in a single civilization's triumph, but in the quiet collaboration of cultures across millennia. Phoenician star charts, Polynesian wave songs, Arab room lines, and Chinese compass roses, each thread in this tapestry holds part of the answer. The ocean refused to be claimed by any one empire. Instead, it whispered its secrets to those who listened, regardless of language or creed. What we call discovery was often just the moment one society's knowledge brushed against another's, like monsoon winds meeting at sea. Think of the Arab pilots who guided Vasco da Gama to India, or the Tamil fishermen whose rhyming tide tables still echo in Kerala's harbors. These weren't footnotes in history, they were master navigators whose contributions shaped the world as profoundly as any European explorer. Even the Polynesians, whose voyages to Madagascar defy conventional timelines, remind us that maps can be written in DNA as surely as ink. The ocean's first cartographers didn't work in isolation. They stood on the shoulders of nameless sailors who dared to sail beyond the horizon. Yet for all we've uncovered, the waves guard their oldest stories fiercely. Imagine what still lies hidden: a Phoenician wreck preserved in the Gulf of Combat silt, or a Harappan trading post buried beneath Dubai's coastline. Every year, new technologies from deep-sea drones to AI-decoded manuscripts pull another fragment from the depths. The real adventure isn't just uncovering who was first, but piecing together how these cultures borrowed, adapted, and honored each other's wisdom. So where does this leave us? Not with a tidy answer, but with an invitation. Visit the Maritime Museums of Zanzibar, where Swahili star compasses share space with Portuguese astrolabes. Watch documentaries that resurrect the voices of Maldivian Falaki singers or Ming Dynasty astronomers. And when you stand at the shore, remember, the ocean's surface is just the beginning. Below it, in the silent dark, lie shipwrecks stuffed with maps we've yet to read and stories waiting to rewrite history once more. The Indian Ocean's greatest lesson. That discovery is never finished. It's a tide that keeps returning, each wave bringing fresh secrets to light. For all the maps we've uncovered, the Indian Ocean still guards its most tantalizing secrets, the ones that might rewrite history if we dare to ask the right questions. Take the ancient Egyptians, whose mastery of the Nile is legendary. But what if their reach extended far beyond the river's embrace? The temple reliefs at Deir el-Bahari show seafaring ships returning from Punt, laden with exotic goods, yet no Egyptian nautical charts have ever been found. Did they exist only to crumble in Alexandria's fires? Or were their maps never meant for parchment at all, but etched into temple walls or whispered in rituals, lost when the sands reclaimed their ports? Then there's the enigma of private collections, the whispered rumors of Ottoman vaults holding pre-Columbian charts, or Portuguese noble families hoarding stolen Arab manuscripts. In 2014, a dealer in Istanbul claimed to have seen a fragment of a 9th century map showing Antarctica with glacial details no medieval sailor could have known. It vanished before scholars could authenticate it. Could there be other relics like this, tucked away in forgotten trunks or beneath layers of palimpsests, waiting for a curious heir or an accidental discovery? And what of the Indus Valley? Their seals depict ships with towering masts, and the dock at Lothal suggests a maritime culture as sophisticated as their urban planning. Yet no Harappan maps survive. Were they painted on perishable palm leaves or woven into textiles that frayed to dust? the absence gnaws at historians, especially when Tamil Sangam poems describe trade with lands beyond the western waves as early as 3000 BC. Here's where history becomes a detective story. A single artifact could shatter our timelines, like the controversial nautical chart of 2800 BC, allegedly found in a Bulgarian tomb but dismissed as a hoax. Or the underwater megaliths near Japan's Yonaguni, which some argue resemble man-made harbors from a drowned civilization. Skeptics scoff, but the ocean has a habit of proving skeptics wrong. So we turn to you, the explorers of the digital age. Have you heard family legends of lost maps or stumbled on odd references in old books? Maybe your grandfather's attic holds a crumbling journal with strange coastal sketches. The comments are your dockyard. Drop your theories, your fragments, your what-ifs, because the Indian Ocean story isn't finished. Every tide could bring a new clue, and every viewer might hold the next piece of the puzzle. After all, history's greatest discoveries often begin with someone saying, "Wait, that doesn't make